If you like to make your NFL games a little bit more interesting, you've come to the right place. It's the Even Money Podcast with Ross Tucker and Steve Fezzik.
Yeah, Vegas, baby, Vegas. It is the Even Money Podcast. We are, of course, presented by DraftKings. Love the code Ross when I'm playing DraftKings Best Ball on the DraftKings app. We're still taking, by the way, potential participants, contestants, whatever, for the next free Best Ball draft with me and Joe Dolan, my co-host of the Fantasy Feast podcast. Of course, you can also use the code Ross over on the DK Sportsbook app. I am Ross Tucker, former NFL offensive lineman, 5 teams, 7 years. Now I'm a broadcaster calling games for Philadelphia Eagles, including Friday night at Baltimore, where I was informed by our buddy Paul Roberts that the total has already come way down because of reports of weather and storms and rain. We'll get to that a little bit later because, yes, we have NFL games and betting lines to talk about. It's preseason, yeah, but that's okay. It still gets us excited. It's guys in NFL uniforms on fields with betting lines in play. Steve and I will have a lot to talk about today. He also has an interesting MLB note. And yes, we got a couple emails from you guys about DraftKings. We'll get to that stuff momentarily. I also call games for CBS and Westwood One. I appreciate those of you that follow me on social media at Ross Tucker NFL. It's basically football or delicious beers I'm drinking or food, in particular, press box food. Baltimore, you're up first. We'll see what you are rolling with on Friday night. Really looking forward to that. You can check me out on social media at Ross Tucker NFL. You can check out all of our shows and the highlight clips of all of our shows, either on social at Ross Tucker Pod or on YouTube, youtube.com/Ross Tucker NFL. The star of this show is the machine that is Steve Fezzik, the only 2-time winner of the Super Contest over at the Westgate. I love having Steve as my co-host. It's a big reason why I think we might be the #1 NFL betting podcast. If we're not, feel free to email me and let me know which one's better. I want to listen to it and hear about it because I'm curious. We get really, really good feedback and excellent numbers on this show because we're fast, 25 minutes or less. Give you all our bets. Pretty cool way to go about things. Check out Steve on social at Fezzik Sports. Steve, we've never done this before, but I think in this instance, it warrants it. We're going to get to the bet bash. We're going to get to the MLB situation that you alerted me to, the lowest MLB total of the year. And we're also going to get to some of the preseason betting lines you like for this week. Programming note, because we love you guys, we're going to start to do the show even earlier on Tuesday mornings. We will be recording this show moving forward at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time. That's 5:30 a.m. Vegas time. Steve is an animal, but we want to make sure we give you guys every edge we possibly can. It also means for those of you waking up on the West Coast and maybe even the Mountain Time Zone, you'll be able to listen on your way to work. The other folks, you'll still be able to listen pretty early. I don't know when you go to work. All right, but Steve, let's start with this. I got an email. I got a couple of them, but I got an email from a Tom L. in Philadelphia who rated and reviewed the show and emailed me the screenshot, right? So it's very simple. If you want to be able to go to the top of the pecking order and have your question be answered by Steve right away, take advantage of any of the sponsors you hear on the show or rate and review the show on like Apple Podcast or whatever podcast app you have, especially Apple, and send that to me, ross@rosstucker.com. He wants to know about the DraftKings surcharge. Does it mean he shouldn't bet at DraftKings anymore? And what does he do if the other sports books in Pennsylvania where he lives follows suit? So let's start with this. In the interest of transparency, everybody knows DraftKings is a major sponsor of this show. I will say this. I have not talked with anybody about this yet. I don't. It's not like that, right? Like they advertise on the show, but I don't like. Hey, what are you guys doing with this? Like they didn't tell me. I didn't ask them. So I'm going off the same information that you guys have. Steve, can you explain to me what it is and what it isn't? All I read was there's going to be a surcharge tax on people that win in certain states. Is that right?
Yeah, my understanding, and I have great news here. I'm going to propose a compromise that hopefully DraftKings will listen to and perhaps can implement. But what they're talking about right now is having, and only in states with a high taxation rate for DraftKings of above 20%, they are going to implement a gambling surcharge of 3.2% on your winnings. Now, this is being called a nominal charge. Unfortunately, our definition of nominal differs. So, by example, you bet 110 to win 100. But in this case, you're going to take a haircut and you're not going to win 100. You're going to win $96.80, a 3.2% haircut. Where the math works out, Ross, is that is like betting on your straight bets. That is like betting minus 113.6 instead of minus 110. So think about it. Since the mid 1970s, when the federal gambling tax used to be 10%, and then it went to 2%, and then sports books went ahead and charged minus 110, and they've done so every sports book for the last 50 years. Charged $10 basically in VIG. And now DraftKings wants to go to charging $13.60. Well, if you're used to paying $10 for something like I have for 50 years, I'm not paying $13.60. Now, what's curious is that when you play parlay bets, it's not like you're laying minus 113.6 on each and every bet. It's only on your final payout. So this would be the rare case if they implement this, Ross. You really would want to play parlays instead of straight bets. The math would work out that you're laying lower vigorish. So the compromise that I'm going to throw out there, there's a lot of recreational players that just love playing big parlays. And because of that, I think DraftKings, if they want to implement this only on parlay bets. That could fly. I wouldn't be happy about it, but I think it's a viable alternative. With the current idea of putting it on all bets, I don't believe that is going to stay in place. And certainly it's not going to get matched by other operators.
I have so many questions. I really do. Because, Steve, can you even imagine the amount of time and thought that went into this before they made this decision? I've seen some of the people on social media being like, I can't believe they just decided to do this. Like, I can just tell you in my dealings with them, with the show being part of the DK network and them advertise, like they have a very thorough process for every decision. And this must have been extremely thorough. So just some questions, right? Number one would be, I guess I wonder, I'm curious as to how many states this is where they're doing it. That would be number one. Number two, I wonder if this is in some way, Steve, a move to try to get those states to lessen their taxes. I know nothing about this, but if this leads to less people playing and less revenue for the states, is this a move to try to get the states to lower what I'm sure DraftKings feels like is exorbitant taxation? I think that's interesting. Your thoughts on that? I got a couple other things, but your thoughts on that?
Well, the problem is, my understanding is New York State charges like 50% tax rate. And I believe only a few states are being are actually at above 20%, but the ones that are well above 20%. So I don't see any way that it's going to be viable for this to come down. And another problem is the states that are charging, the high percentages are the most populated states like Pennsylvania and like New York. So they impact, even though it's not very many states, it impacts a large percentage of the bettors. So think about this. If you're in New York, you would be better off like getting an account in another state and somehow driving there and betting there so you wouldn't have to pay the 3.2% surcharge.
You said something I thought was interesting. You've been paying $10 for 50 years. You're not going to pay $13 now. What else in life is like that, though? I'm just saying, like, nothing else is cost the same as it did 50 years ago, right? Like that. Is there any other example in life of like where a price for something doesn't go up?
Well, the price is going up because I'm wagering more. So it's indexed to the cost of living. So if I was betting $44 to win 40 in 1985, now I'm betting 110 to win 100. So I would say that indexed to the cost of living, it stayed, exactly the same. But people are just wagering more. So I would make the case. I'm trying to think of a good example, and I don't have one. But it's a percentage base cost, and pretty much in all businesses, right? There's businesses have their percentage margins, but the difference between sports betting and everything else, you could argue, hey, people for whatever reason pay more at Starbucks for coffee than anywhere else. Well, that's because Starbucks has a unique part of coffee that they make. But in this case, if I'm betting the Vikings against the Raiders +5, Ross, it's exactly the same bet, whether I make it at DraftKings or North Carolina, New York, or somewhere else. There's no difference between the two wagers. So there's no way you're going to be able to charge more for that coffee when it's an identical product that's widely available at other places.
When I go to Starbucks, Steve, I get a coffee frappuccino. I don't like coffee at all, but my wife said, try a frappuccino, and I realized the scam there. It's a caffeinated milkshake. It's delicious. It's awesome. When I get beer, I get Labatt Blue Light because it's delicious. It just has a nice flavor. Most light beers don't have flavor. Enjoy it with your friends and live life to the power of we. Always enjoy responsibly. Beer, Labatt USA, Buffalo, New York. Now, when I've been going out to dinner this summer, Steve, trying to, be a little bit healthier with some of the alcohol intake and the calories, I've been doing vodka, water, and 3 limes. 3 limes. And my vodka of choice, Smirnoff. The perfect vodka for crafting delicious cocktails. It's the world's #1 vodka, and they're an official vodka partner of the NFL. Grab a bottle of Smirnoff at your local retailer and head to Smirnoff.com to find recipes of delicious cocktails perfect for game day. Please drink responsibly. Smirnoff #21 vodka, distilled from grain, 40% alcohol by volume. The Smirnoff Company, New York, New York. Please not share with anyone under legal drinking age. All right. My last thing on the DraftKings thing, because I know people, so my wife is in the propane industry, Steve, okay? And when a big propane company buys a smaller one of the first things they do is raise the prices. And they lose maybe 10% of their customers, but the margins they get on the other 90% more than make up for it with the profitability, okay? I have a bunch of friends that bet on DraftKings or elsewhere. You know what they never talk about? The handle, the VIG. And they're smart guys, but it's just not their. They just want to go bet a game. They just want to bet on the NFL games and have an interest in it. I know there's a lot of people that are really into betting and do well with it. Maybe not that many that do well with it, but do okay with it. Is it fair? Is there a possibility here, Steve, where DraftKings is saying, you know what? We're still going to get all the recreational bettors. That's who we want. The people that are upset about this and really care that much about the surcharge, those are probably the ones that do really well or do pretty well and either break even or win anyway. And we have to limit them sometimes because they win too much. In other words, does DraftKings lose the customers that they don't really need or want in the first place and keep the ones that are the most profitable for them? I don't know the answer. I'm just throwing it out there.
It's a great question. It's altogether possible, I'll just throw out numbers, that DraftKings as a company will make more money implementing this change where they'll see their business go down by 33%, but their overall bottom line to increase and do better. However, it's a short-sighted idea for them to do this because if they're only making a slightly higher amount in net revenue and their customers get a much more worse shake gambling, their customers are much worse off and they're slightly better off. You put everything together and in the net, it's a horrible idea because bottom line, you want your customers to have a fair chance to win because then they're more likely to remain customers for the next 20 years. And the bottom line, all this business used to be in Costa Rica. It used to be in Curacao. And it moved to the U.S. domestically because it was legal and safe and everybody liked that. But now if I'm betting in the U.S. and New York and I got to spend all this extra money in VIG, heck, it's time to go back to meet me tonight in Costa Rica, not Atlantic City, because that's where a lot of people are going to go back to.
What do you got going on, Steve, with this MLB situation today?
Wow. I love Wrigley Field. It's a bucket list place to be. And part of it is it's so unique with how the wind impacts games in Wrigley. Winds blowing in 20 miles an hour. Have not seen this all year long. We got a total of 6. Minnesota at the Cubs. We got 2 good pitchers. But I got to tell you, Ross, I think it's wildly entertaining to watch a football game or a baseball game in strange weather conditions. You're going to see that with your Eagles. Baltimore, week 1. We've seen that total come down from 37 to 34, in some places 34.5 because heavy rains in Baltimore this week. But if you want one baseball game to watch all year long for entertainment, I'd watch this Cubs game and watch that wind howling in, which is going to steal 1 or 2 long fly balls. They're going to be easy outs instead of home runs today.
Okay, let's talk about betting the NFL preseason. We talked a little bit about the Hall of Fame game in particular last week. But do you have like 2 or 3 rules or something for betting preseason football, Steve? What are we doing here?
Lots of pressure on the overs. Overs are being bet in these games, except for the aforementioned Philly game, and that's all weather related with the possible downpour during the game. But other than that, these kickoff rules, the feeling is that it is going to increase scoring by at least 1 point per game. And we are seeing movement, Ross. All these totals that are lower, below 37, all of them, quite a few of them are getting hit over. The bettors feeling there's going to be more scoring. And we saw that certainly in the Hall of Fame game, a game that historically has been very low scoring. So because of that, just looking at Thursday, bold prediction, Carolina, New England, I see the total sitting right now at 34, Detroit Giants 35.5. I'll predict both of those games. The overs get hit. If there was one wager that you should make right now, I'd go over the 34 Carolina, New England right now.
Wow. I like it. All right. What else do we need to know about preseason betting? It felt like you used to talk a lot about unders. It felt like you used to talk a lot about backup quarterbacks, Steve.
Right.
Where are we with that?
I haven't gone through all my rotations, but ideally, Seneca Wallace is like Mr. August. You want a quarterback, you don't care if he's that great throwing the ball down the field, but when the backup offensive linemen, Ross, get messed up and they don't block and the quarterback's under duress, he takes it and he runs. And hey, a lot of times this is the 3rd and 4th string quarterbacks trying to make the team. So they don't run out of bounds either. They do everything possible to have successful drives, despite not having much help from their line blocking for them. So because of that, mobile backup quarterbacks are who you want in preseason. I will say this, there's huge line moves. I love betting preseason. It's very popular. I was just talking to my buddy, the Hitman. We're vehemently disagreeing. We're talking about one game in particular, the Vikings-Raiders. The Vikings opened the favorite, Ross. Now the Raiders, quarterback controversy, who's going to start? The Raiders are a 5.5 point favorite. In no world do I believe that the Raiders are worthy of being a 5.5-point favorite in any game on the road, I will be backing the Minnesota Vikings. I don't care that the Raiders are going to evaluate their quarterbacks more. So basic strategy, I get a home team in a total crapshoot catching 5.5. I have to back the Vikings in this situation.
Wait a minute. Even though Antonio Pierce said both starting quarterback candidates are each going to get at least a quarter, so you're getting 2 quarters of starting quarterback play, although I guess what you're saying is you don't really look at it that way.
Well, they're 2 bad starting quarterbacks, and the Vikings have their own situation at quarterback where they want to, they need to get their quarterbacks time to get them ready for the regular season. The Vikings did go 3-0 last year in preseason in the first half, 0-3 for the game, curiously. So I'm not concerned about how the Vikings are going to do in the first half. Wouldn't surprise me if the game didn't land 3. Raiders win by 3. All the early money on the Raiders wins. All the late followers, all the followers on Monday after the line moves wind up not winning.
Any of the other games jump out to you? We have 2 Thursday night, the Lions, Giants, Panthers, Patriots. You already talked about that one. We've got several Friday night, 3 of them, Texans, Steelers, Falcons, Dolphins, and then my game, the Eagles at the Ravens, kicking off at 7:30. And then there's a boatload of games on Saturday, as you might imagine. And there's actually a couple games on Sunday. Any of these other games jump out to you? You already said you like the Vikings getting 5 at home, and you like the over 34 on Panthers. Of all teams, Steve, Panthers and Patriots.
Well, it's preseason.
Neither one of those teams scored 20 points all year last year.
That's the beauty of it. Well, what are you going to work on when you can't score? Your offense or your defense? You're certainly going to work on your offense, and Carolina's offense is going to be much better. Their defense is going to be worse. Interesting, like I got to mention with the Raiders-Minnesota game, that was the worst game of the year last year. That was a 3-0 Raider win, if you recall. So think about this. The Raiders are laying 5.5 in a game, and these teams played last year, and the Raiders scored 3 points in that game, but they did win. I did want to ask you, let's stay in Pennsylvania where your team's the best. The Steelers sure looks like it pick 'em. My goodness. I think I got to favor Pittsburgh at pick 'em, right?
I don't know. See, so much of this, and you can talk about this, Steve. A lot of this, to me, is over the next 48 hours, making sure you're locked in, 72 hours for some games, following the beat reporters for these teams for leaks about how much the starters will play, if at all. There are some teams, I wouldn't be surprised if Justin Fields is out there for a while for the Steelers running around. They might do that. Now, other teams, the Eagles historically have not played their guys. Maybe that's different this year. I don't know yet. But I think, and we talked about last year. Did the streak end for the Ravens? The preseason game streak, is that over? Where they had won like 40 in a row or something crazy?
I don't know if it's 21-0 or 20-1. But I know the Ravens were not dominant in the preseason, but they won a lot of close games last year. Pursuant to that, the Rams are a team you never want to back in preseason. They just don't care. They've already got 3 linemen injured. If there was a wager I would make, I hate laying points in preseason. I could get behind the Cowboys minus 200 on the money line against a Rams team. McVay just does not care.
Well, and not only that, not only does he not care, and he never plays anybody in the preseason, but you said it. Puka Nakua's week to week. 3 linemen are out. You know what the last thing McVay wants out of this game? To get anybody else hurt. Or even, quite frankly, to get their backups hurt, because if some of these guys are week to week, they might be starting the opener. So he can't afford to have them hurt and not ready for the opener. So very, very interesting. Make sure you're following Steve on social media at Fezzik Sports, because he's very opinionated. He's a good follow. I'm at Ross Tucker NFL. We are at Ross Tucker Pod. And of course, you can always watch the show, youtube.com/Ross Tucker NFL. Got some good bets for you from Steve for this weekend. Good luck, everybody. Hope you guys win some money.
Thanks for tuning in to Even Money. Make sure to also check out the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, Fantasy Feast, and College Draft, all on the DraftKings Network, YouTube, or subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform.